first thing I asked for.
All right. Hello, all. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Overtime. My name is Nick Soutter. I'm here with a Zandering, and we've got some we've got a plethora of things to discuss today. Just hours ago, we learned that the Georgia Fulton County District Attorney has requested a special grand jury probe into Donald Trump's election interference in Georgia, and the pressure that he applied to the Secretary of State to, quote, find new votes to swing the election in his favor. She's also expanding her investigation to include Trump's former attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. 700 pages of the internal documents of what Trump was doing during the, and who he was speaking with during the January 6th insurrection, and we are about to get into that very bigly in just a minute, are, as we speak, being collected from the National Archives and transported to the House of Representatives pursuant to Trump's failure to stop it at the U.S. Supreme Court. But the biggie today, and we discussed this briefly yesterday when a single source had implicated Rudy Giuliani in a really bizarre attempt to remove the state's electors. And we all know this process. We all learned it in high school. We don't actually vote for president. What we do is we vote for, and we've covered this on In Time. Landon Nolan is in our civics covered it very well. You've never voted for president, almost certainly in your life, unless you've been an elector. You've never voted for president. You voted for your electors, and your electors are assigned by usually the Secretary of State, who assigns them usually proportionately, but they can actually assign them in some states any way they want to. There's no law saying that they have to assign them based on the popular vote in some states. And then, but however, the state chooses to do it, and the Constitution grants each state the right to choose its electors any way it chooses, any way it chooses. Again, any way it chooses. Meaning if a state actually chooses to do it by coin toss, technically, there's nothing the federal government can do about that. That's not, and that's one reason why it is so hard to implement one system that covers rights for all Americans, because the Constitution is pretty explicit that the states get to determine how they choose their electors. These states get to determine how they choose their electors. That's going to become really important in just a minute. So we had learned of a plan and an attempt, a very serious attempt to subvert this process that occurred on the 19th, I think it was December 19th, if I recall. And we're going to discuss that attempt and what we have now learned about it today, which has really kind of changed things. So what we have learned is that Trump campaign officials led at the state level by Rudy Giuliani himself have been implicated now in a wide-ranging conspiracy to overturn the U.S. election by substituting the state's duly elected and certified electors for fraudulent ones that had not been certified or chosen by the state. In at least 7 states in which Trump lost, according to now 3 sources with direct knowledge of the scheme. These counterfeits would then illegally cast their votes for that had been for Biden with the okay, yes, and Titan is asking me, so thank you. I was not clear about that, and I should have been. We are also simulcasting on Overtime. I'd like to try to be doing more of the Overtime shows on Overtime. We're simulcasting to that. You can join us on In Time or Overtime. I don't think we have any mods over there right now, but it's we should be cross on the live chat. So we'll if there's an issue, we'll deal with it. But we are simulcasting, and I apologize, Titan, for not warning you of that earlier. My bad. Surprise! You have to mod 2 channels now at the same time. Congratulations. Good luck. Anyways, the key here is we already knew that this had happened in 7 states, and it doesn't happen 7 times in 7 different places by accident in the same way. So somehow this was coordinated. Yesterday, we discussed on the show that one of the fake electors in Michigan, who we have learned a lot more about, and it's rather concerning, but one of the electors in Michigan said that he was in touch with a lawyer representing Donald Trump, and that that lawyer had directed things. We have now learned that the lawyer, he did in fact name the lawyer, and the lawyer was Rudy Giuliani. So now the question is is that where it stops. Now, this feels a lot like Watergate when you're sort of teasing out how far up the food chain does this go. But we will get to that in a second. What had happened specifically in Michigan is that 19 people attempted to enter the state house claiming to be state electors. They were not. They had a forged certificate saying that they were, in fact, the duly elected and certified state electors. This was a lie. The state electors had actually already arrived to vote. Nobody would sign the certificate or let them in the building, and then the stream is not running on overtime. All right. Then I think, I'll leave it. Thank you, Titan. I appreciate it. Somebody, we knew yesterday somebody, we did not know who, we knew it was a lawyer, called up a county clerk and demanded that the county clerk goes to the Michigan State House and sign the document saying that it is in fact a valid document and that they are in fact the electors. The person did do this. Why? I don't know. Presumably some force of office was applied, and we've learned today that in fact that is the case. It was in fact Rudy Giuliani who made the call. So Rudy Giuliani called a state clerk and said, you have to go down to the State Department and certify that these electors are in fact real, when in fact they were not. The clerk did this. However, they still were unable to cast their votes and were stopped trying to get into the further into the State Department. That appeared to be the end of it, except that similar things happened in 6 other states. And we're now learning that Rudy Giuliani himself was involved. So, let's see. Let me just so these people. So there were 6 other states where, with fake documents, a number of people claimed in varying degrees, and we're going to get into this because they didn't all try the exact same tactics. Some might be a little closer to legal than others. We'll get into that, but claimed to be delegates certified by the state, and in fact were not. And their goal was to take votes. And every one of these 7 states were states in which Biden won. In every one of them, all of the electors were Republican Party officials. To the best of my knowledge, all of them. We only have confirmed a number, and we're going to get into that. But so far that we've been able to confirm, all of them were Republican Party officials, local. So let me clarify that for the state, not at the national level. But in the news reports that I've been seeing, they've been called Republican electors or fake Republican electors. We did not use that term yesterday because I thought that was unnecessarily charged. That seems to suggest that a Republican Party official of some kind was directly involved in their capacity as the Republican Party. We now believe that that is the case. So we may be actually calling them Republican, fake Republican electors, because it appears that the Republican Party on the state level was involved in a couple of these instances. We will get into that. Nonetheless, we know that 7 states, all swing states, were victims of a coordinated attempt to overturn the election by swapping the legitimate electors, which were required by their states to vote for Biden, and having them instead vote for Trump. The states were Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, Wisconsin, Nevada, and New Mexico. And in each case, these were obviously stopped, and none of them got through. How that happened, we will get into momentarily. But the other thing that happened today was all 3 of these claim that at one point or another, aside from being in direct communication with Giuliani, that there were questions about the legality of this, and they kicked the questions up to the campaign, meaning they were in constant contact with the campaign, and a campaign staffer today confirmed with CNN that they had gotten this message and that there had been, in fact, discussions about wording that could maybe make this kind of legal, and that the decision was made ultimately by Trump, and that he, in fact, was aware and involved in the planning and had handed at the state level the operation to Giuliani. Again, this was by now 3 separate sources from 3 separate states, all of them involved in this, making roughly the same claim. One of Now, and by the way, just FYI, Trump is the de facto, when he's in the president, whoever the president is the de facto head of the party, meaning Trump was the head of the Republican Party at the time he was doing this. So you are now having ostensibly the head of the Republican Party engaged in this and the head of several local state parties. And I'm not kidding when I say that. One of the fake electors was, in fact, a man named Mashaw Maddock, a woman. Sorry, I think I misgendered her there, who is the co-chair of the Michigan Republican Party. And she was one of the fake electors. She was representing herself as a duly recognized, yeah, I think that's correct, representative of the state of Michigan, and that was untrue. And they managed to get a clerk to illegally certify to this on a forged document. That was also untrue. Now, we reported last month on the discovery by The Guardian of a PowerPoint presentation which had been held by and endorsed in several private messages which had been released on Discovery by Trump's then chief of staff, suggesting ways to overturn the election, most of which hinged on Vice President Mike Pence abusing his authority as head of the Senate. As it's not commander-in-chief, it's the executive chief of it's the head of the Senate. I'll be corrected at some point, I'm sure. To do one of, what is it, Andrew?
The president of the Senate.
Thank you, President. Thanks. Shit, that's what I was hoping for. Appreciate it. So he was supposed to do one of three things, and he had been instructed to do one of three things. The first was to invalidate all of the electors for Biden, which he felt were, quote, suspect, which, as it turns out, the only suspect electors in the entire election were for Biden, and then replace them with his own electors. That apparently is what this was part of an attempt to do. Or he was to simply invalidate, that was the second option. I skipped an option there. The first option actually was for him to reject all of the Biden votes and declare Trump the victor by fiat. Sorry, I forgot that one. Must have blocked it. Second one was to reject all of the delegates that were voting for Biden in those key states and then replace them with surrogate delegates, which we had said, and we read off that PowerPoint, said that they would have to have these alternate delegates provided. And then the last one was to simply refuse to certify and just run out the clock. And hey, when the inauguration day comes, if there's no other candidates, I guess Trump gets to stay in power, was the thinking. This was truly fucking stupid. At any rate, ultimately, so now as a result of this information, the January 6th committee has now subpoenaed Rudy Giuliani, asking him to address specifically these charges and the multiple fake electors in multiple states, which apparently he was running. Ultimately, in Pennsylvania and New Mexico, several of the forged certificates had a caveat added later. This caveat was kicked up to the Trump administration and debated and discussed. The caveat was, should they say that these are not actually legitimate delegates and are to be used only in emergency in case, by some circumstance, the actual delegates are invalidated, which under no authority that I'm aware of is Biden capable of doing. We don't know whether the Trump administration was for that plan or against it. But in two states, that caveat was added, in Pennsylvania and New Mexico, saying that these were delegates in reserve and sort of standby delegates, which in those states there is, to the best of my understanding, no process for. Nobody can declare by fiat that, hey, this person right here just happens to be a standby delegate, just FYI, without some sort of state supervision. But nonetheless, that caveat was in there. Sam DeMarco, who was one of the fraudulent electors in Pennsylvania, has said that they had added that caveat. It was forced to be added, and he, in fact, appears to not have wanted it, and that he was in constant contact with Rudy Giuliani, and it was through him that they first learned that, in fact, Trump was involved in the process, because he had said that the decision did, in fact, get kicked up to Trump, who was aware of everything they were doing and had been supervising. Meanwhile, Giuliani was out lying about fraudulent votes. Now, this is around the time when news organizations are now being sued. Fox News is being sued for perpetuating these lies, saying that the manufacturer of the machines had failed, or the machines themselves had failed, blaming the manufacturer for a number of votes that presumably Biden got that he was not entitled to. This was all lies, and so obviously fake. Not true, no evidence supporting that. They're all being sued, and the suit will likely succeed. At any rate, it appears now that was actually part of a plan to try to legitimize the electors before this process actually happened. So we are now talking about a coordinated effort over 7 states to replace state delegates with substitutes chosen by the campaign to re-elect the President of the United States. That's what we're looking at. A former campaign staffer did tell CNN today that all of this was done in coordination with Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Christina Bobb, and ultimately Donald Trump. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nasala has said that, in her view, a number of extremely serious crimes have been committed. She said, quote, "Under state law, I think you clearly have forgery of a public record, which is at a minimum a 14-year offense, and election law forgery." She said also she believes that this case actually should not be prosecuted in Michigan. She believes that this case has to be done at the national level. The reason is because it does cross state lines and it appears to be a nationwide conspiracy. I really hate to fucking use that word because we use that word way too much. But in this case, again, 7 states, 7. And this has happened. This is not, these people showed up. So she said that because of that, because it appears to be across multiple state lines at the national level involving a national campaign and an election for president, she does not believe that it should be run by the Attorney General's office. It would also put her in an awkward position because she would be prosecuting members of the opposing party. Further, she might be called as a witness, and that was another uncomfortable position if she had to prosecute it herself. However, she has said she will. If the federal government will not pick up the prosecution as it is, in her view, required to because it has superior jurisdiction, she will prosecute all of these in her state. Nonetheless, let's see, the certification documents in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, and Wisconsin represent a total of 59 electoral votes, with 59 alternate electors not chosen by anyone in those states or any representative of the people of those states. They were, again, 2 states said that they were pending decertification of the legitimate ones, which never happened. And in those other states, the Arizona through Wisconsin, the certificates falsely claimed that these were, in fact, legitimate electoral representatives. So the Office of Pennsylvania Attorney General John Shapiro has said that while they are looking into this matter and taking it very seriously, they are not sure that this constitutes a crime. And that it's not necessarily actually a forgery because the conditional clause that was implemented in the Pennsylvania version of the certificates said that it's only conditional. The condition was never met. So there you go. This is met with mixed legal reviews, but the general consensus appears to be that doesn't matter. Nobody was authorized on behalf of Pennsylvania to select alternates, and certainly not the office of the president, who also has the power, ostensibly by this at least scenario, has the power to invalidate all the original electors. So by whatever legal theory they're using, aside from being utter horseshit, seems to suggest that the president of the United States and or the vice president in conjunction have A, the ability to invalidate any delegates they don't like, and B, determine who the replacement delegates are. That's the end of the Constitution, folks. That is the end of the United States of America, if that is the legal precedent they are using. And yes, that's the legal precedent that they are using. let's see. Wrapping this up, Nancy Wong, executive director of the Michigan-based Voters Not Politics voting advocacy group, has said, in fact, roughly that. This is existential. This is about the fundamental institutions of our government and whether we can vote at all. Whether we have any power whatsoever, it's completely different. This is urgent. It is a battle of a completely different kind. It is coordinated. It is massive, and it is at a national level. Biden commented yesterday at a news conference saying, quote, "I doubt anyone thought that this would happen in America in the 21st century, but it is happening, sending different electors to state legislative bodies." And that is it. Now, I really would like to discuss this with Xandring, who's been immensely patient throughout this. There is a lot to do, and it is reasonably complex, and there is some nuance that we have to go over, and we're still learning about this. But it on the surface, and we're going to get into it. I mean, it feels like Watergate. It looks like Watergate. I don't think Nixon was accused of anything even remotely like this. It's shocking. Oh, I did overlook. Oh Jesus, I did overlook two things real quick. One. We are now aware circuitously that at some point Pence did know about this. The reason is because, and for some reasons passing understanding at the time, Pence had his speech introducing starting the proceedings of counting the votes and certifying the election. He had it altered. Mike Pence had the speech altered at the last minute. The speech was altered to include the phrase that he would only count delegates who had been certified by the state and their representatives. Every time I get more and more impressed with Mike Pence, and I understand, I think, a bit more why fucking Trump was so pissed at him. At any rate, as that's going on, Attorney General Letitia James has said that her office is still deciding what charges to bring against Trump, but it has substantial evidence he's committed crimes. No shit by this point. She said he has a number of misleading statements and omissions in his tax records. It appears as if he's inflated the value of his New York apartment. He inflated the size by almost 3 times, estimated the value at roughly $327 million, when in fact it's closer to about $100 million. When Alan Westberg, the the financial officer of Trump's operation, was asked what happened, he said, well, it was just a bit of an overstatement, quote, give or take $200 million. He's lied about the value of his properties and the income generated by his golf course in Scotland. He's lied about, Jesus, he famously admitted under oath, quote, my net worth fluctuates. It goes up and down with the attitudes and with the feelings and even my own feelings. So, and he invented the phrase prime the pump, for those of you who didn't know. He's said the Trump Tower is 10 stories taller than it actually is, that the inaugural crowd was 3 times as large as it actually was. He also said, by the way, that only the mob takes the Fifth. If you take the Fifth, that must mean you're guilty. An innocent person would never invoke the right to the Fifth Amendment. Ivanka Trump invoked the Fifth Amendment 97 times in her last deposition. Eric Trump 500 times in his last deposition. That's where we stand, folks. Well, Xandring, welcome to the show. How are you?
Well, I was better before that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've discussed the rosy outlook or the potential rosy outlook for the United States with you before, and you always think when we finish speaking that you need to go down about a 5th or 2 of high proof whiskey when we get done.
I wish I could.
You have managed to point out actual concrete things that can cause the end of the republic as we know it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anyone, I'd like to speak with a lawyer. I mean, the precedent that Trump appears to want to set is that the vice president can, if he suspects that any delegates have not been chosen properly, which how the fuck would he know? He hasn't gone through the process in all 50 states, but regardless, the vice president can choose to just toss out any of them and replace them with anybody he wants. That's the end of. I mean, that's it, right? I mean, that's period. End of story. The U.S. is over. We're a fascist country. Whoever's in power just chooses the people who vote for them. I mean, it's Russia. Am I missing something?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
that is the way that you go from being a constitutional republic to being a banana republic.
Well, and if anybody's going to contradict me on air and tell me I'm full of shit, it's going to be you. And he didn't do it, folks. So, all right. Well, so what are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, it's interesting because the states themselves are supposed to set up the process whereby they'll select their electors to send to Washington to vote for the president.
Yeah, I'll interrupt you and just say I think I mentioned that once, but yeah.
Yes, you did. Mm-hmm. So, now you have a bunch of people interfering with state processes. Like the one person wanting the federal government to prosecute this because it crosses state lines. I mean, the conspiracy certainly crosses state lines, but it makes makes me wonder. You would think that would be something you'd want to be federally charged because it's a conspiracy involving several of the states, but they were specifically breaking state law, not federal law. The Constitution specifically says the states are allowed to do whatever they want to do.
All right, that's okay.
Like
that's an excellent point, because that's something we've said, and that's something that I think people aren't aware of, and that is why it's so hard to pass a law that says, okay, we're going to have bare election standards that say you have to have this many minimum hours or whatever, is because the Constitution explicitly says that each state is responsible for how it chooses its electors, and it is responsible for choosing the grounds on which how it's going to decide how it's going to run its own elections. So, yes, all of these people were essentially challenging the states, but if they were attempting to submit fraudulent electors to I think it gets dicey, and if there was a conspiracy to do this across the board in order to invalidate a U.S. election. So I think there's both, right? I think there's a number of state laws, but if this hasn't run afoul of, and this is why, we used the title, Sedition in the title, and it's always very tempting to use clickbaity titles, but if we're talking about anybody who tried to stop the certification on January 6th by breaking into the Capitol building and starting this revolution so that Trump could stay in office, if they're seditionists, then Trump organizing this is a seditionist, unless I've missed something. But I do think I've kind of cut you off, so please continue.
Oh, that is a good point, and it would rise to the level of sedition, and the federal government, would be able to charge, say, Giuliani and Trump with sedition, and once they get more of the details, and if everything pans out, to be exactly the way that you've just described, which I don't have any particular reason to doubt at this point, both of them should be charged with sedition. But they can't be charged for the state crimes because the Constitution specifically kicks the federal government out of that process entirely. So they're interfering with state processes that has nothing to do with the federal government at all, even though you're trying to interfere with electors for that you're going to send to Washington to elect the president. So the individual states could sue all of those people involved, or bring charges against all of those people involved for election fraud, and whatever other state laws that they would have violated. And then the federal government could go after them specifically for sedition and conspiracy to commit sedition. So they could get both the states and the federal government after them. And in a case like this, if everything is as cut and dry and as apparently clear going forward as it is right now, that's exactly what should happen. This isn't something that you play around with. This is the Constitution. This is the very foundation of a republic. A republic does not function if you don't have free and open elections. So I don't think you can stress that. Yeah, I don't think that you can stress that enough. And when somebody goes to these kinds of extremes to try and subvert an election like this, they need to be prosecuted to the absolute full extent of anything that they can be prosecuted with. They need to go to jail. You don't play with shit like this. This is how countries collapse.
Well, and let's talk about where the rubber meets the road on some of these issues, where there can maybe be some nuance and some wiggle room. Before we do, $1 super chat from Discovering Ancient History with Cheap Son of a Bitch. I mean, with Pat Lawler, with Pat, $1, who, by the way, said gave the full thing that he wanted to say. Quote: generally, I would say that you're indeed full of shit, Nick, but on this rare occasion, you appear to be correct. And then did the $1 super chat below that so that he could get that comment read for the price of $1. Thank you so much, Pat, for your support. We appreciate it. Pat, the $1 Lowinger. No, thank you, Pat. We do appreciate it. Who's been, by the way, I wouldn't say that to I wouldn't bust anyone's chops like that. He's been a very strong supporter of the show. So thank you, Pat. But I'm still going to give you shit anyway. At any rate, they've actually spoken, and I've seen some footage on Fox News of them talking about sort of doing this, and they had talked about this before, and we saw this in the plan. So the question is, what the fuck were they thinking? Because you think about the bugging of the Democratic offices, the whole Watergate scandal, and one of the reasons that took so long to get traction is because people would read this in the Post, and it would be on page 6, and people were sitting there saying, this can't possibly, nobody's this fucking stupid. Nobody's stupid enough to do something like this and to send in, lawyers. I think, if I recall, the lawyers were basically sent from the White House. I'm like, why is the White House sending lawyers for a couple of just regular burglars? And it's just everything was dumb shit after dumb shit after dumb shit. So why would they try to replace the electors? And there's a misconception, and I've spoken to a few people, and when I first heard it, I thought this, which is, they're just going to try to swap out the electors. What are they going to do with the old electors? How are they going to... What appears to have happened is they weren't trying to, they weren't going to kidnap the other electors and try to sort of intercede at that level. What they were doing was really kind of this almost wish-thinking childish, which is that, well, if we just declare a group of alternate electors, then if Pence says, nope, I'm not going to take those, I'm going to take the alternates, and then just squeezes them in, they're going to go in, even if they're not certified. They haven't been vetted. The state doesn't even know who they are. The state doesn't know they exist. And it's using forged documents to even get them into the building or to say that this is legit and legal when none of it is. So it's not... they even talked about doing something like this. They didn't get into the details. And again, on Fox News, they said, we're thinking there should be alternate electors in case there's problems. But... I don't know how seriously anybody took them when they said they do that. I don't think anybody thought about what's the process, and they didn't think about the process because apparently they just had all these people show up with a fake document saying we're the alternate electors. None of this was, it was fucking stupid. First time I've ever seen government trying to actually cut back the paperwork. Nah, we're not going to bother vetting any of these people. Just toss them in. And the co-chair of the Republican Party in Michigan should have known you can't just Photoshop and print out a document saying you're an elector and then hop in and go down to the State House and say, I'm here, let me in. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it gets... It reminds me of the little meme from Airplane where everybody smacks their forehead. And you're like, oh, my God. And this is pure speculation, but this is kind of sort of, when I go through and I read all of the stuff that apparently had happened. And it's like the only thing I could come up with was Trump was too stupid to understand the kind of, I hate to call it conspiracy because it's not really a conspiracy. This is actually true. But I think he misunderstood. The states get to get to choose their delegates to send to Washington to vote for president. And those delegates do not have to honor the popular vote in their state.
Well, they may by law of the state, but it's based on the state. The state decides whether they have to, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, correct. The states decide whether or not they're going to force their electors to to vote, to follow the popular vote. The states don't have to. Of course, I think that the politicians should get voted out by the citizens of the state if they, were to change that. But, and I think so. He listened to that and he's like, oh, so the popular vote doesn't really matter. It's these state electors, and and he somehow got it in his mind that, well, we can just have the vice president, invalidate the electors that were going to, follow the popular votes of their states, and we'll have these other guys there that he can then just select. And it's like, okay, this is the part that you didn't really think through, and you listened to too many people, the same kinds of people talking about you don't actually have to have a driver's license to drive a private vehicle, because you're not engaged in commerce, you're not driving, you're traveling. And it's like, yeah, go take that to the court and see how well it works. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. So, he's listening to these people telling him, it's like, well, look, the popular vote doesn't really mean much. It's what the state electors are actually going to vote for when they're sent to Washington, D.C. And so let's try and get in that door, and we'll see if we can't get our own electors in, or get alternates in there in enough states that, we can just have the vice president say that there was shenanigans were afoot or whatever, and that these aren't, these are suspects, so we're going to have to throw them out. And we, surprise, happen to have some alternates here ready to vote.
Big shock.
Yeah. And, like or hate Mike Pence for his personal beliefs, he does believe strongly in the Constitution and is quite keen on following it. So I don't, and after 4 years, you should have known who Mike Pence was. You should have known what his beliefs were. You should have known his adherence to the Constitution, and you should have known that there is no way in hell you were ever going to get him to try on board with trying to do shit like this. Like I said, this is how you get banana republics. This is the collapse of, I hate to say democracy because we're not, but this is how you get rid of the will of the people entirely. And Mike Pence would never go along with that. If you knew anything about him, you'd know he'd never go along with that. So, yeah. What the hell were they thinking? And the fact that they thought that they could do all of this and that it wouldn't come to light. I mean, this is one of the main things when people start talking about the moon landing was a conspiracy. One of the most compelling arguments against it being a conspiracy is, how do you get that many people, especially involved in the government, to keep their mouth shut about something like that?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't happen.
How do you get Russia to keep its mouth shut? You know who's got a vested interest in proving the conspiracy? Russia, Japan to some extent, and Japan can see it. They've got I think they've got a telescope. Yeah, they do. They have a telescope in space now that can see the spot. I think it's got to be, or was it? As I recall, I'll have to. It's been a while since I got into these conspiracy theories, but I know they'd be able to have disproven it by now, and nobody's said anything. So how do you get the Japanese and the Russians to stay quiet?
Exactly. It's like you're not. There's no way that this was going to stay secret. I mean, even if they'd have gone through and Mike Pence would have actually gotten on board and they actually tried all of this, it would never have stood up. It just wouldn't have. This would have come out. They would have found all of this information anyway, and they would have had a lot more reason to really dig even more, had they gotten Mike Pence to just say, yeah, these guys are suspect, and here's our just handily convenient for this election only alternate electors that just happen to want to elect Trump and not Biden.
Let's hold another election. Not let's get rid of the suspect electors and tell the state it's got to find another way to pick its electors or do whatever. Not or not just eliminate them completely and go based on the ones that aren't suspect. We're going to substitute ones that are going to vote the way we want them to. That's what Putin does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's ridiculous that they thought that they could get away with this in any way, shape, or form. And like I said, I think that was a little bit of, was listening to a little bit of the how do I say politely, that's not crazy right people that, that think they know, that think they're lawyers, that think they can get away with a lot of things that have been proven to be not. So yeah, I rubbed my head going, oh, I can't believe that. I mean, you cannot. If you wrote a fiction novel and you used this as the plot of your book, you would be laughed out of the author industry. Nobody would buy that damn book because they're like, look, this is way too out there. You can't claim any any tie to reality in your book. This is just crazy town.
I think I said
it happened.
Yeah. Well, and you had said, anybody who knows Mike Pence should know. And I remember I was speaking, and if Dr. David Stout, who was a friend, and I like the guy. He worked with the Codex on a couple of debunking projects, and he's literally a rocket scientist from Los Alamos, and. But the guy who debunked the Bible code, and got a picture of him on Time magazine with the code plastered across his good guy. But he had me. I went to a couple of conferences with his, and on one of them I said, they said, don't impeach Trump because you'll get Pence instead. I was like, oh Jesus, I would take Pence over Trump any day, despite the fact that I'm much closer politically to Trump. My values politically, are closer to Trump than to Pence by a long fucking shot. Trump is actually almost closer to a Democrat in his values, and Pence certainly is not. But Pence is A, qualified, and B, does actually believe in the institutions. Trump doesn't give a fuck about any of it. And I was sitting there going, no. If I had a choice right now and you could have me vote for Pence, I would vote for Pence. I was like, no. If it's Pence or Trump, Pence has my vote, and this is going to make a bad joke. No. At any rate, and I was like, so I'm a liberal, and I fucking knew Pence would, but I think I said, if I had to bet the Republic on Pence, I probably would. Well, it looks like maybe I was taken up on that. Oh, dear Lord.
Yeah. It's like you can agree with his personal values all you want. You're not going to have a collapse of the Republic under Pence because he believes too much in the Constitution. So, he believes in our federalist system. And so, you're never going to be able to get him to go along with something like this. And, at least you're not going to devolve into a banana republic under a Pence administration. Whereas clearly Trump tried. So.
Let me ask you a question, just as a hypothetical, and I don't think would have devolved into I don't think it would have fully gone through, but I think would have had chaos like there's no fucking tomorrow. Let's assume for a second that Trump had a different vice president. Now, we've learned now several times that Pence of all fucking people appears to have been the stalwart that essentially saved the Republic. Now, I don't know if he had gone the other way, if it would have fallen, but holy shit. He was the biggest line of defense we had that held. So let me ask you this. What if it had been another vice president and they said, yep, this is what I'm doing? What would have happened?
Oh, yeah, you would have had a lot of, you'd have had chaos. The election certification would have been postponed much longer than just a few hours.
Well, how would it have been postponed? If the vice president certifies it then and there, throws them out and flips the election, what happens next?
Oh, then there's going to be a hell of a lot of court action. The 6th, the people that were there on the 6th would have essentially been welcomed in. They wouldn't have been kicked out. The whole Capitol area would have been just pretty much in chaos for quite some time. And, because of course they're all going to be sitting in there, hey, yeah, we won. And so we're still in charge. And so here's what's going on. But we already know that, the National Guard wasn't responding to Trump's orders. So I don't think that they would have been able to get the military to help them to secure anything. So, it all would have come apart, but it would have been one hell of a shit show while it was happening.
Well, and you'd have the 7 states suing because they voted constitutionally, legally. They used their electors, and their electors were illegally thrown out by the vice president of the United States to install someone they didn't vote for, and none of the people that they represent voted for. So, this is
standing to sue the federal government over this. And like immediately, I mean, this would have been something that it's like, you think that the vax mandate made it through the Supreme Court quickly. You haven't seen quickly yet until you see what would have happened at the end of that. I mean, that would have been like the next day. You would have had people filing lawsuits, and the courts would have been convened the day after that. So, because you can't let something like that stand. I mean, you can't. That has to be challenged immediately and dealt with immediately. It's like you can't allow kind of regular judicial speeds or legislative speeds to figure this out. You would have had obviously you'd had pretty much all of the Democrats in the federal government would have been up in arms about the thing. Nancy Pelosi would not have stayed silent about it. So there would have been a hell of an uproar going on. And like I said, it would have been chaos for, probably a couple of weeks. And the rest of the country would be sitting there scratching their heads going, what the hell is going on?
So let me just do a quick rundown for some of the new people who've come in here, and then I have a couple of questions and other observations, because I want to dovetail that into a few other things that we now know, and that we're going to be learning over the next few weeks, because I think we may have some pretty intense coming weeks. So, but what we already knew going into this week was that in 7 states, fake electors had come in to, in some cases, try to outright supplant the electors. I think in 5 cases, they basically said that they were actually the legitimate electors and the other ones were not. And in 2 cases, they said, well, we're here alternatively for when and they said it really was pending the removal of the other electors through some ostensibly what they were going to argue was credible and legal means. At any rate, none of them were successful, but they had forged documents and had used, it looks like, the office of the presidency to get one of those documents certified by a town clerk. And all of this was done under the immediate organization of Rudy Giuliani. We have 3 separate sources that say this from 3 separate states, all of them involved in this. And all of them have now claimed that the Trump administration and Trump himself was involved in at least some of the decision-making and involved in at least some of the planning of this and knew of it ahead of time. And that's all really quite shocking, and that is a conspiracy, and that's a pretty large conspiracy to overturn the election. Now, we have 700 documents that have just by the U.S. Supreme Court of what Trump was saying and who he was saying it to, going now to Congress as we speak. The National Archives have been holding it, and they have said that they are preparing those documents, and I'm expecting them to arrive at Congress within the day. So, and I think they're going to go over it with renewed urgency. Somebody had posted in the live chat, and I didn't get I forget who it was. I think it was Rez, about Steve Bannon. He has clammed up, and we know already that he was in fact involved far more. That he said he had no idea and hadn't been talking to anybody. We know already from records that he had been speaking with Trump repeatedly that day. So the question is now, how much was Bannon involved? All these other people. And I think we're going to start to find some of this out pretty quickly. And my guess is some of the people in here are going to flip. The Michigan district attorney is pissed and has said she will prosecute this. And I think you're right. I think some elements of it, the way it was worded, it made it. She seemed to indicate it's an either or, but there are some that really she has to prosecute. The federal government couldn't. They don't have jurisdiction even if they wanted to. So we'll have to see. But yeah,
her position on that. I understand her position on that too. She's like, look. I'm from the opposing political party, and one of the last things that you want to do, and this is one of the reasons why it's been so hard to get charges brought against former, anybody in the federal government, really, unless they're, kind of low fish, but, like congressmen, senators, presidents, it's really hard to get charges brought against them after the fact, because you don't want to be seen as being prosecuted by your political opponents. So that's one of the things that has always been hesitant to do. But when you come to something like this, it's like, I understand that, you're a Democrat and you don't want to be potentially placed in the position of having to try and prosecute Republicans for election malfeasance. But this is something serious enough that it's like, it doesn't really matter. If you have the evidence and you can prove in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt that this happened and who did it, then they need to be prosecuted and they need to go to jail. Like I said, this is not something that you play with. It's like, I tend to support the Republican Party more than the Democratic Party. I still consider myself to be an independent and more closely aligned to, wow, I just completely forgot what stupid political party that is. Libertarian. Jeez, holy crap.
Okay, yeah.
I so disliked Trump that I wouldn't vote for him, and I could not bring myself. I hate Hillary as well. So it's like I could not vote for either of them. It's like the lesser of two evils is still evil. So, I voted for Gary Johnson, and then I'm forgetting her name, the second libertarian candidate, instead of Joe Biden. So, because I could not bring myself to vote for Trump at all, especially in the second, Joe Jorgensen. I voted for Joe Jorgensen in the second election because it's like, okay, while there have been some good policies that have come out, good conservative policies, some cutting through some of the bureaucratic tape, there have been some good things that came out of the Trump administration. I still hated Trump himself. I thought he was a buffoon, didn't know what the hell he was talking about, and was essentially a drama queen. He thrived off of the drama of everything. So it's just, I can understand why she wants this out of her hands, and she wants the federal government to take over. But there are going to be some issues, especially with the trying to replace the delegates or get their own electors into the state houses with forged documents, that the states are going to have to bring those charges. The federal government can't because it has zero jurisdiction. The Constitution specifically forbids the federal government from having a role in any of that. So the states that this happened in are all going to need to stand up, and they're all going to need to put their cases together, and they're all going to need to prosecute. And if they have the evidence, they absolutely need to do this.
All right, I'm gonna quote the Michigan Attorney General, because I my hope is, if I'm reading this correctly, and I think I am, my hope is that this is going to address those concerns. I think you're absolutely right. I think you've earned your honorary liberal and proud of it pin, and you'll be getting that in the mail. I know you'll wear it once just because you're a polite man and a kind man, and then it's going to be used to prop up your desk if I'm lucky, or melted down for it. I don't know, but you'll be getting that. But at any rate. $2 super chat, Nicholas Lamar Soutter, on behalf of Maya Atkinson, quote, "Since when has there been a non-evil president to vote for?" Sorry, that was just good enough. I'm like, okay, I'm going to highlight that one. I'm going to give it an honorary super chat status. So Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel had said, and I quoted this earlier, but it's really worth getting into, that. And what's interesting here is, every time you hear an attorney speak, they hedge the fuck out of everything, if for no other reason than if you say somebody did something, you can get sued for it. So you say suspect or allegedly or alleged until they're convicted. And they're meticulous about this, and they have to be. That's their job. That's part of how they operate. So this is an attorney general saying, quote, "I think you clearly have forgery of a public record, which is a 14-year offense." Okay. So that's as strong as I've ever seen, with I think one or two exceptions in my life, of a lawyer coming out and saying that they've got someone before charges have even been filed. I said, and election law for, Maya's a sweetheart. Maya's a sweetheart. We are lucky on this show for all of the people who contribute and support to this. Maya is answering you too, although I'll never admit it. And thank God YouTube has installed the new things. Let me go in and cut this part of the show. So I'll cut the show and we'll be fine. But thank you all. Thank you, Maya, for your just amazing support throughout all this time. So at any rate, just keep going forward. This is not in time. It's overtime, and certainly not on time. But at any rate, it's election said, I think you clearly have forgery of a public record. So she's accusing, in this case, the head of, or the co-chair of the Michigan Republican Party of what she says clearly have forgery of a public record and election law forgery. That is a stunning thing for an attorney general to say in public, and it is her political rival because it's the head of the Republican, the co-chair of the Republican Party in Michigan. But she has said that she will prosecute it if they don't. So it's clear to me she's aware of how serious it is, and I think this strikes me as someone who's pissed off, which I'm glad, because I don't think there's been enough people being pissed off about this. And I said this, and I did the rant last time. I was like, one of the things that bothers me about liberals and why I don't identify as a Democrat in general is because they don't want to get pissed off, and they don't want to sit there. And it's like the conservatives sometimes say, or the Republicans, I should say, well, if you don't like America and if you're going to criticize it, get the fuck out. Well, no, if you're going to sit here and do shit like this, I think you should be the one to get the fuck out. But, Ian Davenport, Australian dollars, $5 Thank you, Ian. We really appreciate it. Everyone here works very, very hard, and it's really nice when it feels good when people show their support, and either by liking, subscribing, hint, which does really help the channel, and by doing stuff like that. It really does. It's emotional support, and it helps us keep the show going because it also does take fun. So thank you, Ian, very much for your support. At any rate, I think what was it?
The reason, or like when you were talking about, lawyers tend to be very careful and couch their terms by, allegedly, suspected, etc. And I'm doing the same thing by saying, I'm couching it in, if they have the evidence and can prove in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt, they absolutely must bring those charges, and those people must go to jail. And I'm operating off of the assumption we don't have all of the information yet, and it hasn't been adjudicated by a court of law. It hasn't been presented in a court of law. So if everything lines up and they have the evidence, they must prosecute this. The states and the federal government together must prosecute all of the people that are involved. I mean, that is a very, very important thing. You need to throw out we don't really want to be seen as prosecuting our political rivals when we get into power. If they did something like this, then you absolutely better. You said, send me my honorary liberal pin. And it's like, this isn't a liberal issue. This is absolutely a conservative issue, because ostensibly one of the core beliefs of conservatism is to conserve the republic, and you don't conserve the republic by allowing people to just throw it away. It's like the Constitution exists; it's a real thing, and it is the law of the land, and you need to follow it. And when you try to subvert it by committing sedition, you need to go to jail. Like, don't pass go, don't collect your $200. You need to go to jail, and you need to do it for a long time, so that other people won't consider doing this. I'm pissed at this shit going on. It's like, this is not something that you expect to find in the United States. This is something you would expect to find in Libya, or maybe Uganda, or Uruguay. It's like you don't expect to find this in the United States. Well, so thankfully, our institution survived it, and we're able to catch it. And now we're getting to the point where we're finding out how this failed. Because it is important to point out that it did indeed fail. So.
Well, that's the other, when the hijackers, the people there was a plane that almost took off, but was stopped with, I think, 3 people on the terrorist watch list. And people said, well, Jesus Christ, how'd they get on the plane? This whole system needs to be overhauled. Well, they got on the plane because there's a delay between when they update the systems. And it takes a few minutes for the system to go through, which is why the list is checked a second time before the plane's actually allowed to take off. And it was that second check that caught it. So it was actually the system operating exactly as it's supposed to, which was in part sort of what was happening here. And again, thanks to Mike Pence. Holy shit, I can't believe how many times I have to say that. At any rate, so I did want to ask you about something, because, the last time you and I had a discussion similar to this, you had come on to discuss what and I still do. I no bones about it. Me, the guy who tries to be polite and nice to everybody, I think the kidnapping of citizens I think it's kidnapping, taking Portland citizens, putting a hood over their head, throwing them in the back of a truck, wearing uniforms that are not identified, not in an unidentified mommy vans, then with no record of where they went, who they spoke to, apparently some sort of legal proceedings, but no receipt that they had attended any kind of court or legal proceeding, no receipt that they were ever arrested. I think that's Pinochet level shit, and we had a very long discussion on that, and that was being done by what is called today the Republican Party. Now, you've been a conservative for quite some time, and you have really what I see as traditional conservative values. So ostensibly, your team here, and you were really quite displeased then, and you've voiced displeasure at a number of things and agreed with a few too, but certainly most of all the shenanigans that one would hope you'd really be displeased by, you've certainly been. So what are you thinking now? This is ostensibly your party, and as you know, I was told the party of the Constitution. So what are your thoughts?
At this particular moment, after all of the things that have happened, especially over the Trump. The fact that the Republican Party didn't stand up to the things that that Trump tried to do and didn't stand up and denounce him for those things, regardless of the fact that he's supposedly the head of the Republican Party. You know, the Republican Party is still, they're the ones that put him forward as their nominee. They need to step up and say, this isn't right, and we don't agree with what you're doing, and you're destroying all of the values of the Republican Party. The fact that they didn't do that leads me to the path where there is very little evidence to support that the Republican Party is a conservative party at all. You know, they have veered off into God knows where. I don't even know where they are anymore because they don't represent, you know, any of the conservative values. They claim they do. They claim they're for small government, yet there is zero evidence to support that they are, in fact, for small government, since all of the Republican administrations since I
Garfield?
just forgot his name.
Garfield, was it?
Not Gar. Was it Grover Cleveland?
Oh, Grover. I got the G right. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Cleveland, yeah.
Grover Cleveland have expanded the federal government, the size and scope of the federal government. They have not reduced a damn thing. Occasionally they come in and they cut taxes, which you think, oh, well, that's great. You know, Republicans believe in less taxation, which is true, yet they expand the scope of the government. Trump was worse than this than even Obama was. So it's like, and that's immoral. That leads to a huge moral hazard, which we discussed, you know, yesterday, where it's like, if you're going to have the government do something, the citizens need to pay for it so that they understand the costs of the things that they're authorizing the government to do. And Republicans were the absolute worst at this. They cut taxes, so you got a bonus, hey, I'm paying even less, yet they still expanded the scope and role of the federal government. You know, so there is very little evidence that I see that the Republican Party is in fact a conservative party at all. I am incredibly disappointed with the Republican Party, and I think that they need to pull their heads out of their asses and evaluate what it is that they actually think is right and good. And if they went back to espousing principles of limited government, self-sustainability, liberty, and individual rights for all people, you know, I don't see that they're a viable party to even want to be associated with, let alone vote for.
I remember when we were covering some of the how the media had inaccurately reported a number of things on the Rittenhouse case. Rittenhouse, I don't like the kid. I don't like what he was doing. I don't like why he shouldn't have been there. But the media got a lot of things wrong, and that had to be corrected. And you don't fuck with, what's true and what's not. And I think it was Titan. Somebody had DM'd me in the middle of a show where I was getting really hot and bothered by it. And they were like, everyone was like, why is Nick so upset? And I think it was Titan who said, look, I know why you're pissed. It's because it's it's your party or it's your side that's been telling you things that aren't accurate, and you expect everyone else to lie to you, but not them. Actually, it may have been Pat. Who, by the way, has done a $2 super chat. So thank you very much, Pat. Actually, I think but one of them had hit me up and just said, you know what, it was your side that disappointed you, and that's why you're pissed. And I was just like, and you had said earlier, you said that you maybe have more right to be pissed than I do, and to some extent that's probably true, actually, because you and I were both violated as much as. We are now having our government not respecting our vote, which you and I equally want. We might vote differently, but you and I agree 100% on having our votes count. And so we each suffered the same indignity there. But for you, it's the people that you look to fiscal responsibility. As I understand it, conservatives are about fiscal responsibility. And I think you're right. Cutting taxes and raising spending is not fiscal responsibility. But B, and the one that I really want to stick to, is states' rights which I've been told repeatedly, states' rights, states' rights. Texas wants its rights. Every state, especially south of the Mason-Dixon line, wants its rights. Okay, states' rights, and yet this is a attempt to take away one of the most important rights the states have, according to the Constitution, which is the right to determine how they're going to vote. But this does lead to, I want to get your thought on that, and it leads to one more interesting thing. Well, I'll tell you right now so that you can dovetail them if you want to, or we can handle them separately. But, is Trump really a Republican, even in the new Republican area? What the hell is really Trump? Because he was new to the party. But anyways, please.
Well, I mean, there's so many things wrong with it. And one, Trump clearly is a Republican. Because the Republican Party nominated him. That makes him a Republican. Whether he holds their values or not, they accepted him as a Republican. They put him forward as a nominee. The fact that the Republican Party has done all of these things, or at least tacitly approved of them, or didn't disapprove of them, that just tells me that they're not conservative. The Republican Party isn't a conservative party. I don't know what the hell they are. I guess you could come pretty close to saying they're the Republican Party, the official Republican Party. I don't think that people who identify as Republicans necessarily are fascists, but the Republican Party certainly seems to be trending in that direction, because you don't do this kind of shit if you're actually for freedom, liberty, limited government, fiscal response. You don't do these things. And yet they don't seem to have much of a problem with it, because they haven't come out and condemned Trump for doing these things. They still haven't come out and condemned Trump for any of these things. They haven't come out and said, yeah, there were some pretty bad shenanigans going on in some of our upper management, and that needs to be redressed. And, we apologize for letting it get this far. And they're not doing any of those things. So I have no recourse left but to assume that the Republican Party doesn't, in fact, believe the things that they espouse. So, I cannot support them for that.
I'm going to do a quick rundown and then probably hit one or two things, and then we'll wrap it up. So, for those of you who are just joining us, what we're covering, the thrust of what we're covering today is that. And we've known for a while that in at least Michigan, we first learned in Michigan where 19 people went to the State Department and claimed to be electors. They were not state electors. They did have a document that said that they were state electors, that said that they had been certified by the state of Michigan as electors. This was not true. Somebody, a lawyer on behalf of the Trump administration, was able to get a clerk to come into the office and sign the document, ostensibly making it somewhat more valid, and attempted to get them into the State House to supplant the actual electors. This did not happen. They didn't let them in. However, it was shortly thereafter learned that this didn't just happen in Michigan. It happened in 7 states total. And we discussed 2 days ago both that one person had claimed that lawyer was in fact Rudy Giuliani. And there was at least a claim that was Rudy Giuliani, so that was already tied then to the Trump administration. And we also had what was the other interesting thing that we covered on 2 days ago? I don't know, a lot. It's moving fast. So and we now have today 3 of these fake electors from the different states. So it's 3 independent sources saying that it was Giuliani organizing it, and it was at the behest and with the knowledge of Trump. So if we're going to say, which I think we really can, and I'm kind of the last guy, right? I'm usually the one called unreasonably reasonable, and I try to give as much charity as I can for a number of reasons, and I think all of them are actually rather good. But and sometimes because I'm naive and stupid that way. But at any rate, so I didn't like the idea of calling them seditionists or this or that. But when we did learn, in fact, that was the other thing that we'd learned 2 days ago, was when they indicted for sedition the head of was it the Proud Boys? Which one? Or the founder of? He's not the head anymore, but he was the founder.
I'm trying to remember his name. I can see his face.
But what they revealed, which we hadn't known, was they actually had an entire plan of attack on the Capitol, 3 tranches of of teams, one that's split up according to plan. One part to look for Nancy Pelosi, and sort of like, why are you looking for Nancy Pelosi? I'd really like to know why you're in the hallway armed and with ties and in black garb. Oath keepers, that was it. Thank you, Porpoise. Why are you looking for Nancy Pelosi? I think that's a fair question when you forcibly broken into the Capitol. And when I don't know if they're the ones who erected the gallows, but, I think that's a distinct possibility. Somebody brought that stuff. But at any rate, and then they had weapons caches and were basically prepared for an assault on the Capitol. So we learned that when we hadn't known that before. The state's known that, but they didn't release it until we saw the indictment. And that's pretty fucking damning. But now you add to that what we've learned, which is from these 7 groups, people in them saying, "Oh yeah, we were coordinating this with the Trump campaign," and they don't even seem to really think it's a big deal. And again, the ostensibly Trump campaign did talk about something sort of like this. I don't think anyone thought that would see it this way, and people thought that there'd be an actual mechanism for at least attempting this, where you call up the state and say, "Hey, we'd like to get some backup electors just in case," and the state would probably say, "Go fuck yourself," and then you're screwed because legally there's nothing you can do. But that's not what happened here. At any rate, yeah. So this is a conspiracy, and it's a conspiracy to overthrow the election. I did want to say too. I'm going to trigger you a little bit here, so just let's all brace for it. It is a bit of the boiled frog syndrome, and when I say that, what I'm saying is the name of the syndrome. I'm not talking about the reality of the boiling frog. So we good? Can I go forward?
Go forward.
Okay. Ooh, okay. Which is that the analogy of though you boil a frog and he won't jump out of the water and all that other stuff. Which okay, we're going to take as true for now. I think there have been people who've been steeped in the BS of the Trump administration, and who just, there are people who really fucking believe that this thing was stolen. And if you truly believed this was stolen, and I suspect you as Andring would be willing to do a great deal if you had to defend this country. If you really think the election was stolen, the question is, what would you really be willing to do to defend your family, to defend your country, to defend your loved ones? And I think that's what a lot of these people are facing, which is why it's so fucking dangerous to do rhetoric like that unless you're sure you're fucking right. So I think this has just become kind of normalized, where it's like, well, Trump is just so important to this country that we have to do whatever it takes to, and the ends justify the means. And thank God Pence was not of that mindset. And I think when it comes to when you boil frogs, you monster. Thank you, Daryl. Your contribution has been very helpful. I think Pence genuinely believes that the Constitution was God assisted in the writing of the Constitution, that he is doing God's work by being an American and by being the vice president of the United States. But I think that he also feels that God does deliberately give you setbacks, does deliberately make your life harder, and does test you. And, because he believes the Constitution is the divine word of God, when his party and when Trump comes up there and starts to try to break it, God comes first. And even though I don't believe in his God, and I don't believe in most of the things that his God says, if his God has told him that the Constitution was written by him and you got to follow it, that means under certain circumstances I'd trust Mike Pence more than most people. And that was one of them. Thank the fucking Lord for that. Did I just say that? Yeah. Anyways, I don't know. So, that's what we're talking about. It looks like a conspiracy to, in 7 states, the 7 ones that Trump lost that he needed, substitute the duly certified electors in the Electoral College for new ones that would ostensibly cast votes for Pence, which means essentially, the theory behind this was Mike Pence, part of the Trump administration, obviously, would declare by fiat that the Michigan electors and the electors from Pennsylvania, Georgia, and the other states, New Mexico, that I mentioned, were invalid for reasons, and replace them with electors of his choosing, all of whom would vote for Trump. That's Russia. That's Putin territory. That's Venezuela. That's Argentina during that's I don't know the Pinochet regime. That's all of that shit. There's no.
Yeah, that's Chile. That's Uganda, or not Uganda, Uruguay.
There's no difference, and that was the theory. That's what Trump wanted to do. Let's at least admit that. So that's where we stand, folks. So I don't know. Do we?
Yeah, I believe after all of the stuff coming out, I believe that Trump was looking for any possible way that he thought he could remain in power, and he didn't care. I mean, he didn't care if he was following the Constitution. He did not care. He was looking for any excuse and was willing to use the flimsiest of excuses to try and just remain in power. And I think that he probably was trying to remain in power to avoid prosecution for other things, because, I'm not entirely convinced that he actually wanted to be president. I think that once he said, well, I can be president, he now made a boast and he had to try and back it up, which is the only reason that he stuck it out. But once he had power, he didn't want to lose it. So I don't think he thought any of this through. I don't think it works the way you think it does.
You give him more credit than I do. I think there are losers and there are winners. He's a winner, and winners don't lose the White House. I think that's why he ran. I think he ran because they made fun of him at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and what's his name come out and said, "Oh, I heard you were going to run for president as a Republican. That's funny. I thought you were going to run as a joke." And I think he took offense to that line. I think he took offense to Obama mocking him running for president and all this other stuff. He said, "I'm going to show you." And he ran. And sure enough, he showed everybody because his face fell when he won. And neither he nor, I'll bet you told Melania, "I'm never going to win. Don't worry. But I'm going to show these guys that I could have done it." And then he does it. And I think the only person who wanted to be, wanted him in the White House less than he was Hillary Clinton. And I think the re-election was just about pride. That's it. And I don't think he's smart enough to think ahead to realize the fact that while he was there, he was at least immune to prosecution. But going forward, we already discussed what's happening in New York. They've made it clear that they're still considering the charges against him, but they've said that it looks like they haven't said it was a journalist who reported that, based on what he's seen and who he's spoken to in the office. He thinks RICO is coming up. He thinks a few other things are coming up from the Southern District. So we've got a number of things looking at. One of them says actually they think the big charges are going to be, what was that one? That was 6 months down, but that was for the election tampering. So Georgia has impaneled the jury on election tampering for Trump for telling the Secretary of State to find more votes, but they don't think charges would actually come from that for another 6 months. So that one's still down the way, but they're serious about that one too, it looks like. So I think the takeaway that, in my view, and other people are going to disagree, and if history is any judge, they're right and I'm wrong. But I think this is the death knell for Trump, and I think so for this reason. He's now got a number of indictments that appear to be in the pipeline and presently coming. All of these documents, the 700 documents of what he was doing and what he was saying and to whom, are going to be in the hands of Congress within hours, if they're not already. The Supreme Court has handed him multiple defeats, and I think he's going to become toxic. Now, there is the senator from Florida. I've forgotten his name, but he's in for sex trafficking and all this other stuff. I think he's a senator. He's either a senator or a representative. I'm pretty sure he's a senator, if I recall. We mentioned him 2 days ago, but I'm petered out a little bit here. But sex trafficking, we talked about. It looks like he had sex with a 17-year-old, and so he's on for. But he's got more credibility right now than I think Trump is going to have in a couple of days, and the reason is because. All right, I'll check that. Thank you. I'm sorry. What?
Matt Gaetz, that's who it was.
Gaetz, that's it. Thank you. The reason is because, well, nobody wants to be associated with somebody who's being accused of sex trafficking and yada yada yada. The only thing they like less than being accused than hanging with a sex trafficker is not getting reelected. And I think you'll find politicians, and we've all seen this, especially nowadays. Yeah, it was Gaetz. Thank you. Are very willing to endorse or spend time with just about anybody if it means they can get elected. And to some extent, that really does make sense because, again, the saying that I had said earlier, the expression that if you don't get elected, you can't legislate. If you have the greatest, if you can truly revolutionize this country and make this a much better country and a much better world, you can't do it if you don't get elected. So it doesn't matter how good your ideas are. Everyone thinks they got the best ideas, but if you want to do that and if you want to change this country and make it better, you have to get elected. And so they're willing to make a lot of compromises to get there. But none of that's sedition, and none of that is... And Trump's violated the founding principles of the Republican Party for quite some time. So, I got to be a little careful saying that at some point conservatives and or Republicans are going to say, oh, wait, now you've gone too far. But this is shocking, and this is, tied directly to this attack. Now, then again, I spoke to my wife on this. She's like, look, if people with guns were walking down in the Capitol and conservatives aren't pissed about that, I don't know what they're going to get pissed about. So I don't know. But my suspicion is, because it's not the legislators, and they know, the people in Congress know that they're not the ones who decide who's going to go to jail. They're not the ones who decide who's going to go to jail. And the people who decide who's going to go to jail are now really fucking pissed at Trump. And it starts with the Michigan Attorney General, who seems to be pissed. It's, I think, going to end up being a lot of Michigans and a lot of other people. And I think conservatives, I think everybody in Congress is going to start distancing themselves from anybody willing to say that they are on Trump's side. And the reason is this is toxic in a way that hanging out with a sex trafficker, believe it or not, isn't. It's toxic, but not like this. So I think this is the beginning of the end. I think things are we're going to find out in the next couple of days. I assume some of what's in those documents, Liz Cheney has been a godsend. And I think we're going to find out more what's in those documents. I think we're going to see a lot more subpoenas. And for the first few days, people are going to be pretty honest about it, because most of these people don't think they've done anything wrong, which I love it. Well, hey, we thought it was a good idea at the time. So, Bannon's lawyered up and everybody's clamping down. And that suggests to me that, yeah, there's going to be a lot more to find, and people are interested in finding it now in a way they weren't. So my hope is, and my suspicion is, it's not going to be like tomorrow, but over the next week or two, you're going to start to see support start to pull away dramatically. He's already going at it with Mitch McConnell. So that's my hope. That's my prediction. I don't know. Let me quickly read the super chat, which is it's blank, but it's once again Ian Davenport, which once again, thank you so much for that super chat. So yeah, what were you going to say, Xander, and what's your prediction?
Oh, I said that's a sticker. Not a super chat. It's a sticker.
It is a sticker. Oh, and I'm still not used to those, and they just come up. They're a little weird on the thing. And his previous one was a sticker too. So thank you very much for your support. Thank you for those. And normally I try to spend a little more time saying thank you, but it's overtime, and we try to keep moving forward. Yeah, it's a bit of a different show than In Time, but I really do appreciate it. So thank you. What were we going to say?
As to your point about like Matt Gaetz versus Trump, it's like, sex traffickers violate the rights of individuals by kidnapping them, forcing them into forced sexual slavery and moving them around. That's individuals. It's horrible. It's wrong. But it's individuals. Their rights are being violated. Trump is threatening the security and stability of an entire nation, of all 335 million of us. So yeah, we're talking orders of magnitude worse. So,
yeah. All right. Well,
when it comes to this realm, any breaking of the law, any of these things that they have evidence for, that they can bring a case for, they absolutely must do that. And I would even argue that even if they're not entirely sure they could win the case, the case still needs to be brought. Because you can't have the idea, which is already swirling around, that the integrity of our elections is suspect. As soon as you start getting a majority or approaching a majority of people that believe that, your country collapses anyway.
Good point. That's one of the things that Trump doesn't understand. It's just one of those. The number of lines between that and the raising the debt ceiling, just which is whether you agree or not with it. That as well as anyone, the debt ceiling is different from the budget, and it's just but holding that hostage, holding the economy, and all the number of lines that have been crossed. But I do want to say we've had actually the U.S., whether we admit it or not, has suffered more losses at the hands of domestic terrorists than terrorists from other countries. We don't think of it that way because we don't think of them as terrorists, and we don't think of the KKK as terrorists. They are absolutely 100% fucking terrorists. And we have a number of other kinds of terrorists here, and a lot of domestic terrorists. We have some foreign terrorists, but it's really not, it's not a huge end. The number of people, I think, killed on average a year by terrorism since 9/11, if I want to remember, it's even before now, since Al-Qaeda ever first started saying they were going to try to kill us, is 72 a year by foreign terrorists, and we lose a lot more to domestic ones. So what's going to happen here, and I really hate it when I'm forced to say this, but I think Pat's got a point, and I agree with Pat, which is I think some of the people who are kind of on the fence are, I think some of his hardcore supporters may start to waffle and either say, well, we lost and peel off, or just say, okay, this is a bridge too far. But it's not going to, of the hardcore supporters, it won't be the majority, and the ones that remain are going to, I think he's got a point. I think they're going to, they are going to, hold on, because I think there seems to be a discussion I tried to catch and I missed it earlier, and Titan forwarded it to me, so I'll look at that in a second. But I think they are going to, I think we unfortunately, thank you, Trump, may be looking at another domestic terrorist organization coming out as a result of this. I hope not, but I think Pat's right. I think that's the most likely outcome. So thank you, Pat, for that. So anyways, you were saying?
I was saying?
Were
what
you?
was I saying?
I'm sorry. I think I was going to ask you for your predictions of where this was going to go. I'm thinking that at least politically, he's going to start to lose a lot of support. And I think, it's a blood in the water thing. Trump has been immune to just about everything so far. And no matter what he does, he makes Bill Clinton get away with murder practically. And, and he was known as the Teflon president, if I recall. Trump had said he could murder someone in Times Square, and I believe him. I don't think metaphorically he could get away. I think he could literally get away with murder up until just about now. And I think there are enough people who are genuinely after him and who have seen other people go after him. And my hope is that we've hit the tipping point, and my belief is we've hit the tipping point now where the momentum is gonna get ahead of it instead of lagging behind. And we are, especially over the next few weeks, going to start to see either indictments and or a lot more coming out with information as it gets released. And I think we're going to see more from the Sixth Committee, which I think is going to be reinvigorated by this. And I think he's going to start to lose a lot of support, and that support has been the only thing that's shielded him in any way whatsoever. And my hope is some people wake up. But my wife says I'm an idiot, but she says that all the time. So who the fuck knows if she means it in this case or it's just part of the jetsam of the discussion. So what are your thoughts?
You talk about the hardcore supporters of Trump, and I think that Trump himself may actually end up disbanding them, though they may not necessarily follow Trump anymore, but they're still going to have the same kinds of ideas. But it's pretty bad that all of these things that Trump has done, the very Pinochet-like abduction of people off of the street, which I was incredibly pissed at and ranted about it on that show, and was incredibly pissed off that people who identify as conservatives were lauding the action because it was about time we took those. We don't need to revisit that. We have the show. You can listen to my thoughts on that. But Trump himself seems to have been able to alienate more of his base just by recommending people go get vaccinated than all of the allegations against him of attempting to destabilize and undermine the Republic of the United States. Recommending vaccinating hurt him worse than all of those actions combined, and that's pretty sad. It's really beginning to piss me off because I believe in many conservative principles when it comes to size and scope of government, fiscal responsibility, etc. I'm socially very liberal, and it pisses me off when people don't seem to actually care about the values that I care about, and then try to claim that they're the same as me. It's like, no, really not, because you should care about these things. And I think that the majority of it's probably ignorance, or willful ignorance. They don't want to know, so they don't pay attention, or outright denying because they don't want it to be true. It's like, this is a guy I enjoy, I like. He can't be guilty of these things. And you need to be ever critical of your politicians and elected officials and the bureaucrats that they hire to run the country. Because if you don't, pretty quickly you won't have a country anymore. You'll have their bureaucracies, and they'll get to do whatever the hell they want. So you need to pay attention, at least enough to be able to judge and look at what's going on, the information that's coming out. And then when people are fucking around with the very fabric of the republic, you need to step up and say, this is not okay, in a big, loud voice. And I think we're kind of lacking on that.
I think that's an interesting observation. Trump tells, quote, Republicans, conservatives, he tells that party base, let's overturn the vote. Let's install the president that you want. We love America, and that's why we can't have actual elections and we can't recognize their legitimacy. And these constitution-loving Republicans say, yay, 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 let's go do that. That's a great idea. Say, I got a shot that was recommended to me by my medical professional and practically every medical professional on the fucking planet. And they're like, it's like I don't even know you. Holy shit. Yeah, I think that's where we're at. All right. So one other thing this came down. I think it was Axiom. I had seen them the Discord notification up on my screen, but I couldn't switch to Discord. But I did get I do usually the DMs with Titan, because he'll contact me during the show, so he was able to kick it up to me. So if it was Axiom, thank you, Titan. Thank you for kicking it up. So we got this. It's worth bringing up. We're not going to derail the show or go on forever. And I was just reading it earlier, and I'm just going to quote now at this point from the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian is, I don't normally talk too much about our sources. I say, okay, it's the New York Times, the Guardian. We expect that our audience has some savvy as to what's a reputable source and what's a reliable source on in news and what isn't. But the Guardian is amongst the most reliable on the planet, frankly. Reuters, AP, Guardian, New York Times. I love the New York Times. I think they're certainly the best in the U.S. They're not the best in the world. The Guardian, I think, probably is better, but not by much. At any rate, having said all that, this is the Guardian, so that's saying something in my view. Trump held secret meetings in days before Capitol attack. Ex-press secretary tells panel, and we know this, we had the show on the My Pillow guy, and we're called lunatics when we looked at his paper and he was discussing ways to overthrow the U.S. government. People are like, that's not real. That's not going to happen. And here we are. Nonetheless, former White House press secretary Stephanie Grissom told the House Select Committee investigating the Capitol Hill attacks that Donald Trump hosted secret meetings in the White House residence days before the January 6th attack, which we've had some indications of. And we do know that Bannon lied when he said he hadn't seen Trump in at least 6 months or spoken to Trump in at least 6 months, because we do know now that he participated in at least 1 or 2 meetings by phone and ostensibly more. At any rate, the former Trump aide told House investigators that the details of whether Trump actually intended the march on the Capitol after his speech at the rally. Also said investigators that the details of whether. Okay, I'm almost incapable of reading this right now. I am dyslexic, and if I concentrate, I can usually read. And usually, when you see me reading a script, I've actually read it several times before and practiced it. I'm having issues with this here. Let me skip that paragraph and maybe I can collect myself here. Anyways, it looks like the Select Committee has oh yes, and that's right. She had become Melania Trump's chief of staff. She resigned on January 6th of all dates. And but it looks like at this point what she's saying is that we know that there were a number of secret meetings, or she's saying there are a number of secret meetings known only by a few aides. Most of them were scheduled by his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who was the one who also had the PowerPoint that we talked about that was basically a blueprint for, okay, these are the ways we're going to overturn the election. Gave the 3 ways that Pence could do it, and some of that was piggybacked off the very documents from the My Pillow guy visit. And apparently he had a number of secret phone calls from the Yellow Room. My hope is in the next few days we'll know a lot more once those 700 documents are gone through. But yeah, I'm hoping this is the beginning of the end, and I'm cautiously optimistic that that's it. All right. Anything else you want to say before we bail?
I want to, again, reiterate that if they have the evidence to bring a case for things like sedition, undermining elections, etc., both federally and on the state level, the states and the federal government have the obligation to the people of the United States to bring those cases and to prosecute those cases as vigorously and as thoroughly as they possibly can. The American people need to know and be reassured that the election processes in the United States are not fraudulent, that they are true, that your voice does matter, that they, votes are counted. Because if you lose even just the perception of that, doesn't even have to be the reality. Once you lose the perception of that, you lose the republic. You will quickly start devolving. People won't trust the government. They won't trust the officials. They'll stop listening to the authority of the government. They'll stop listening to most authorities because they'll believe them to be illegitimate, because after all, my vote didn't count and I didn't vote for you. And it is the beginning of the end of democracy and the republic.
I probably couldn't say anything that's going to top that. So thank you, Azandring. What we're going to do is we're going to stay on it. Come join us on the Discord if you want to sort of watch, because we do discuss these things, and we also just stay on top of that news. And if there's something big, we'll usually just go straight from the Discord and launch it off over here. So if anything else happens, and I'm anticipating we're probably going to have some surprise overtimes, I think, in the next couple of weeks. So we're going to keep an eye on it for you. Please like and subscribe. It really actually just also helps the channel. Thank you to everybody who super chatted. That also really does help the channel. And come join us on the Discord either way, and check us out, see what's going on. And my suspicion is we'll be seeing you soon, but otherwise, as Andring will be back with and all this. I'm looking to schedule. We got 2 guests that we're working on, but I've been lagging on that, so this is a good reminder for me to get off my ass. So Overtime will have its regularly scheduled show on Wednesday, as Andrew and I will be back on Tuesday. Thank you all for joining us, and good luck. See you all later.
May you live in interesting times.
Amen.
Welcome to In Time. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. We read all of your comments, and if you like this video, please don't forget to share.